So I think this is well worth going through because I don't fully agree that Brexit is a cult, at least fully. I mean, I don't really think it has that cult like attitude and sort of following unless it's between sort of the hardcore Brexiteers like, Jacob Rees-Mogg and Nigel Farage, but I suppose you could almost brand them as the cult leaders in a way. And of course, there are always going to be the hardcore fanatics. But as we've always said, and I've always tried to make very, very clear, you have to sort of separate the Brexiteers. When I say the word sort of Brexiteers, I mean people like Nigel Farage, Boris Johnson, Michael Gove. That's who I'm sort of referring to. And then you've got Brexit voters, who are the average people. And remember, people voted for Brexit for vastly different reasons, partly because of such a wide campaign that the Leave campaign ran. I mean, there were people voting in 2016 for Leave just because they wanted to give David Cameron a black eye. That was it. They actually wanted to remain in the EU and single market, and they fell for that lie that the Leave campaign ran, and they wanted to leave the EU maybe politically. There were all sorts of very different reasons. So I think this really should be more into a wider discussion about how we start to bring people and certainly talk to people that disagreed with us back in sort of 2016 and sort of bring them over to our side now, because this is something that if we want to sort of rejoin, we in the UK certainly have to do and have to engage people in a conversation this way. So I think it's well worth having this conversation and sort of going over this. So we're going to go over this piece, but before we go diving into that, please do remember to hit the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can buy me a coffee. And as always, there is the YouTube thank you button down below as well, and the Pony Club you can join down below as well too. And that also helps support the channel. So as always, thank you very much to everyone who does help support the channel, and on with the show. So this comes from the East Anglia Bylines, the title of Why Brexit is a Cult and What Can Be Done to Rescue Those Trapped in That Cult. Again, I sort of disagree with the wording of it being sort of a cult, but again, it's sort of hard to disagree, but at the same time, I do agree in certainly some points. But again, I wouldn't sort of cast everyone as being, maybe stuck in the Brexit cult, shall we say. But anyway, into we go. So in September, 4 days after the markets were going haywire in response to the disastrous mini-budget by the former Chancellor Kersey Kwarteng, the very rich Brexit-supporting hedge fund manager Crispin Odley gave his verdict to the readers of the Daily Telegraph. The decision of the markets to rubbish the mini-budget and sell government bonds and the pound against the dollar, at one stage cutting the sterling's value to a level of that which the US currency, and reducing the rating of the UK government debt to that of its Greek equivalent, was all down to, quote, Remainers. Odley claimed that it was the, quote, historic rout in the wake of Kersey Kwarteng's tax cuts, which was triggered by Remainers in the city who, quote, hate the government. So apparently it was all the Remainers' fault. The Remainers were therefore somehow infiltrated not only the currency and bond markets, and somehow managed to persuade all those traders to sell the government gilts and sterling, to so triggering a collapse in the value of both somehow. But I doubt Odley, whom I had never even met, but who is at least a clever and sophisticated market operator, believes any of this. I have no idea even if the daily editor of the Daily Telegraph, who I've also never met, believes this either. I suspect, though, that, again, Chris Evans, no relation to the other one, thinks that at least a sufficient number of his readers will indeed believe this, because they need to. Those were, quote, the very, quote, mad days of the AntiGrowth Coalition, and anyone who appeared to oppose anything the Truss government was trying to do. The International Monetary Fund, the Bank of England, possibly, obviously, all opposition parties, Green campaigners, and there were many part of the malign conspiracy to do the then government down and oppose their policies. Someone was trying to bring down the government, by the implication to discredit the golden dream of Brexit and those sunlit uplands, and someone was to blame. Reality, of course, and the markets had intervened, and reality and the markets had to be wrong, and those Telegraph readers and the other supporters of Brexit needed to know why. I have explained here just what went wrong, and why the Chancellor was so wrong-headed in his belief that he could actually prevail over those markets. The Oldley thesis of Remainers, saboteurs controlling the financial markets is gibberish and madness, and is to say that I suspect he knows it. Most independent commentators, including the government's own bean counter, now accept that Brexit has failed in its aims and now is a negative for the UK economy. Those still wedded to Brexit now need to find someone to blame them. And I have suggested that here before, that Brexit has become a cult, and Brexiteers need an alternative vision that they can cling to. I've been reading about the late psychological foundation of cults, and why seemingly normal people are drawn in, and why they find it difficult to leave. This is a very good summary, saying a cult is a group or a movement with a shared community to all usually an extreme ideology and is usually embodied in a charismatic leader, says one academic. People are drawn to cults because they need to explain to themselves otherwise the difficult to comprehend world events in one simple package. And having been drawn in, they then expend an enormous amount of psychological capital. It is difficult years later to even accept you have been misled, because that means that all that emotional capital expended in the support of the cult had been wasted. Even if extreme reality suggests the opposite, they need to make that painful shift. So, for that reason, trying to extract supporters from a cult is often described as deprogramming. Those involved in doing so have to override a version of reality that it is supported by what they are going on in the real world and on the top of which the cultist has come to believe. To quote the above study again, saying, one element is cognitive dissonance. The theory suggests that when people are confronted with the facts to their contradictory of their beliefs, their values and ideas, they will feel psychologically discomfort. In the cult setting, each compromise makes it more painful to admit that you've been deceived. We now know that the biggest ever majority thinks that Brexit was a mistake, and the latest Chancellor refuses to even accept it. It was, in economic terms, a misplaced, a mistake, despite the views of all those independent economic commentators. Whatever he really believes, he just has to go along with the cult. Those that still believe in, quote, the purity of Brexit, the shifting ideal that they have pledged their whole being to, will not be convinced by any news from the real world. They will require a great deal of painful deprogramming. So I do agree, and really I sort of maybe count myself among this. I mean, we've been here, we've been doing this channel for quite some time now, and we've talked at length how many times like all these trade deals are really bad for the UK. I mean, I just saw Phil. I think it was Phil do a video about how bad the Japan trade deal is. But again, if you've been following my channel, back when the Japan deals first announced, we were telling you just how bad the Japan deal really was, with stuff in there that was relating to bird eggs. And there is no roaring trade in the UK for bird eggs, but that is somehow in the Japan deal. Go figure. But but yeah, most of this stuff is crazy, but it needs to be sort of told people, and you need to sort of keep telling them and keep explaining to them in a way. And I always try to treat every video that at least I can, always thinking that this might be the first video someone is potentially seeing of me, and making sure that I am trying to at least explain in, in a way that at least everyone can sort of understand and engage with, even if I know sometimes I might have to sort of, dumb down sort of a word or a phrase or at least a concept. I'd rather everyone understand what was, what was sort of the point I was trying to get across, or something like that, than sort of, flip to, sort of, as Donald Trump would call it, the big words. But yeah, I think, that is certainly something that I think a lot of people, and especially experts sometimes, I even see in even my own field, just, run away with, expecting everyone to know the same lingo. And it's not really the case. And especially when you're on YouTube, you don't know who might be watching, who might find your video for the first time. So I've always sort of tried to sort of continue with that sort of, philosophy. So I really do have hope that, Brexiteers have seen these videos and, have, taken that information to sort of heart, and to maybe rethink their processes. Have I converted any Brexiteers? I can't really say I have, because I don't have any evidence, but I'd like to think I have, certainly. But yeah, it's difficult. I will admit, deprogramming. Like I say, those of you, I think I've said this before, years and years and years ago now, when I first started this channel, I started, talking to conspiracy theorists and, debunking conspiracy theories. And you may remember just a couple of, well, before, when the Ukraine war first started, we had a talk with Ben, and he, even after that, um, to be honest, in a conversation where he didn't look good, and I was going, well, what about this? What about this? He still continued on thinking that, the Ukraine war is just this, secretly controlled by the US government, etc., etc. And yeah, there are some people you're never going to convince. You really have to sort of take that to heart, that there are some people you are never, ever going to convince. Yeah. But it's always worth doing it, because you can sort of have reasonable conversations and sort of, maybe offer people that hand. And I think you should always offer that people a hand to sort of, help them get out of it. But there are people out there you're never going to convince, because I'll tell you now, even after that conversation, yeah, Ben was not convinced about the shall we say that Russia was not to blame for the US war, and that it was somehow all NATO's fault. Yeah, still very, very much on that bandwagon. But yeah, like I say, there's some people out there, sometimes you're just never going to convince them. So yeah, as always, guys, thank you very much for watching, as always. But like I say, please do remember to hit that like and share button on your way out. And of course, down below, there is a link to my Patreon page and a notification link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And there's a YouTube thank you button. And of course, the YouTube subscription as well down below. And as always, guys, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.